Hi there, I'm Peter Millard and this is 10 Minute Workshop, where 10 minutes of the workshop is never enough, it's never 10 minutes and it's never 10 minutes wasted. In the workshop this week, I need to talk to you about failure, or more importantly, what to do when things go wrong. That's coming up next. You know, a certain level of error, mistakes, happen on most jobs, certainly most of mine, and I've tried to include them in the videos that I do because, you know, it's part of the process, learning from your mistakes. Ideally not making them more than once or twice, but you know, it's part of life, and those kind of silly errors that you make early on, they're easily rectified. Sometimes you get errors, failures, if you like, if you will, that don't manifest themselves until much later on. I'm thinking about most recently the alcove units. It turns out a bit of history on this. This job has been rumbling along for months and months and months. This alcove unit is one of 4 that I've agreed to do. There's also a window seat, bay window seat. There's a double and a single wardrobe in the master bedroom upstairs, and there's an alcove wardrobe, a toy box and a bookcase shelf, multicoloured thing in the kids' bedroom. And we've been redesigned a lot back and forth, and way back early on. The client sent me a reference picture of something that a neighbour's had done, and it was all sort of twiddly, you know, fluted face frames and, you know, Victorian, very traditional. Every conversation we've had of late has been about clean and modern and simple and elegant, which was kind of what I did. Turns out that the client wanted the alcove units to be traditional and sort of Victorian, Edwardian, whatever that is, and everything else is supposed to be clean and modern. Well, so I fitted this sort of, you know, clean, relatively elegant, simple piece, and as much as she admires what I've done, it wasn't what she was expecting. So, you know, fair dues. It's entirely my fault because I've done work for this client before, and I thought we were very much on the same wavelength, and we've got beyond, you know, tying them down in writing. Obviously, that's my mistake. And basically, what do you do? Well, you put it right. That's all we can do. Now, fortunately, these twiddly Victorian elements can be added in afterwards, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do in this video, and fingers crossed, show them being fitted and the end result as well. So come and have a look. So how do we go about turning something relatively clean in the 21st century into a sort of mock Victorian? Well, fortunately, it's not that difficult. That's our carcass. We're not doing anything with the doors down here. And if you recall, the carcass had a top to it. Now we're going to remove the simple little plain deep profile edging from that, and we're going to replace it with a little bit of twiddly Victorian. Further up, we've got our bookcase and plain skinny face frames, and we're going to add to that, some similarly sized fluted face frames. Just a couple of flutes. We don't want these to be too big or too wide, because then the proportions get all wrong. And for reasons that will be best explained when we get back to the site, I'm actually going to make these out of 6mm, not 12. So they'll just be planted on to the existing face frames. Now we're going up the face frame to the top of the bookcase. Normally I'd finish this off with a little bit of cornice, something like this. Client didn't like that. Bit too heavy, bit too plain. I tried this, a slightly skinnier version. This is just architrave. Didn't like that, bit too lightweight. Fortunately, just on a whim, I'd made one exactly the same architrave, just beefed up a little bit. That's much better. That's much more like it. But in fact, it's only going to be a 6mm on there, because this is going to, it's all will be explained when we get back on site. But basically, that's going to be the kind of deal that's not quite so chunky. So all in all, relatively straightforward to do. I've got all the dimensions written on each of the pieces with a big mark on each one to show which ones are the ones that we liked. I specifically made these little samples up so I could take them to the client and make sure that we had a firm decision on everything. Took a little while, but we got there. So really, it's just a question of making those up to size, getting them painted, and then getting them fitted. Now, when it comes to doing these fluted face frames, they're not difficult, but they can be a little bit fiddly. You've got to be quite careful with them and consistent, because the flutes need to be absolutely parallel to the sides of the face frames, of course. So I'll be using a guide rail mounted router with stop blocks at either end, so the start and stop points match perfectly. And I'm using a little 6mm core box cutter to make that cut so that the flutes are consistent all the way along. So I'm going to cut both these face frames at the same time. We've got the guide rail clamped down to the bench. We've got a couple of homebrew little stop blocks so that we know the stop and start points are going to be exactly the same. We're going to cut them both at the same time with 2 flutes in each. We're marked with pencil lines where the centres of those flutes are going to go, and we've got a little notch on the front of the router base here, which shows us where that centre line is. So it's really easy to get a nice, clean, consistent cut.
The router is simply moved across to the next pencil mark for each new cut.
Not bad. Now, I don't actually know if there are other ways of making those cuts. I guess there must be. Core box cutter in a router table and you drop the thing down onto it, but getting those start and stop points to be consistent like that, I don't know how you do that. But a guide rail mounted router with little stop blocks on it, and that whole thing is literally start to finish taking me 10 minutes, including the marking out.
With all the routing done, we can cut them to length and separate the 2 face frames. And with the glue dry, we can prime and paint all the pieces.
Okay, so here we are. We're back on site in this slightly echoey room. This is the problem right here. On this side of the chimney breast, a 12mm face frame will bring that pretty much flush with the actual chimney breast. But on this side, at the bottom, a 12mm leaves a gap, but higher up here, and the higher you go, the narrower it becomes. And the fundamental problem is that the chimney breast here and the wall here are not coplanar. This one is nowhere near straight, unfortunately. Now this bookcase won't go back any further that way, so what I've got to do, I've got to undo the brackets at the top, unglue it all, and bring this side forwards very slightly, so that I can then get a 6mm face frame in there, and it will be even all the way around. That's our first job anyway. Yeah, and of course the other thing I've got to do is to get at the screw that we put in here to tie the bookcase down into the top. So I've got to cut away a little bit of this face frame, but without it showing. That'll be fun.
A few minutes work with a multi-tool and a sharp chisel exposes the screw, which for once comes out without a fight.
I'll just say, better to be lucky than good.
Using just about every tool at my disposal, I managed to release the bookcase and move it forwards by 6mm.
Okay, so that took a little bit longer and caused a little bit more damage than I would have liked, but the bottom line is I've got a 6mm face frame all the way up on the left hand side. I'm not looking to score points here, but I just will say dust collection is important in a sander.
With the original face frames rubbed down, the new ones can be glued up and held in place with spring clips, starting at the top, then the sides, and finally the cornice is fixed on with some grab adhesive. While the glue dries, I can trim back the moulding on the cabinet top, finishing up with a sharp chisel and replacing it with a more decorative moulding. With the glue set and the clamps removed, I can run some caulk around the edges, then give everything a quick coat of paint before refitting the doors and clearing up.
So that's it for this week. How to turn a relatively modern, clean and simple design into something a bit more Victorian. Add a few fluted face frames, a little bit of embellishment, and you're good. Hope you've enjoyed this, hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it out amongst your friends, and do consider subscribing, and you'll be notified whenever I put up something new. But for this week, in the workshop and out, that's everything for now, and I'll see you next time. Take care.